Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome along to the latest Monday night edition of the TII podcast. My name is Craig Dennett, and I'm your host this evening at the start of what is a huge week for Glasgow Rangers Football Club. Joining me to look ahead to, firstly, the big night in the Champions League on Wednesday night. I've got a stellar cast of contributors. First up, we've got Kyran Wallace. How are you doing, Kyran?
Doing well. Always glad to be here. Monday night. Let's start the week well. A huge week, man.
Absolutely huge week. And we're also joined by John Walker. How are you doing, John?
Good, mate, good. Buzzing. So it is a big week. It's just all the Facebook memories for last year of putting PSV out is getting tightened up, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come on to talk about the game in Eindhoven on Wednesday night and pick through the bones of what was the first leg last week. We will pick through the strengths that Rangers had, the strengths that PSV had, have a look at some of the weaknesses as well, or areas where we think we can improve. So plenty to go at there. But first of all, let's get stuck into some of the latest transfer news that we've seen coming into Rangers or out of Rangers, as it may be, mainly out of Rangers, it seems to be. Kyran, first one that we saw this week. And given that a week ago we were asking whether he would be starting against PSV in the first leg of the Champions League, Ianis Hagi is no longer a Rangers player for this season. He's away to Deportivo Alaves in La Liga. A season-long loan, no option to buy. How do you feel about it?
I'm quite split on this one. Absolutely loved him at Rangers. Said all the right things. Fantastic attitude. Like, never ever really moaned about not getting a lot of game time, because let's not forget, like, his most prominent season at Rangers was that 55 season, and he spent the majority of it on the bench. At the same time, he scored a lot of very important goals in that season. But when I think of it over the piece, he's had a really bad injury. But even before that, can we be honest and say ripped up trees? Probably not. Like, some really good goals when he first came that kind of saved us at times. But aside from that, I think it's a great idea to put him in a loan for a year, for the simple fact that one, La Liga is a huge shop window. If he does well there's a chance we get even more than we're getting just now, because his stock's relatively low at the moment, given that he's not played a lot and he's just back from a serious injury. And two, if he does really well there at a decent enough level, then he's going to come back a better player. He's still got, 3 years left in his deal?
3 years left, 2026, he's contracted.
Yeah, so it's a smart bit of business, and I don't know if you believe everything you read on Twitter. If we've got £1 million loan fee there, it's even better business. So for a guy that looks like he'll probably fall behind Tom Lawrence in the pecking order, who's also slightly down in that pecking order but coming back in, then he'd have a real fight in his hands. But I wish him all the best. I absolutely love the guy, but I just don't think he's really set it alight at Rangers the way people are making out.
Yeah, John, I'm going to read out some comments we've got already. Obviously, plenty of opinions flying about Ianis Hagi. He does seem to have become one of these players that the longer he was out, the better a player he became. I've seen a few people question as to whether, had he not had that night against Braga, how would we view Ianis Hagi? And I think that's maybe a fair question to be asked. But I'll bring in some of the comments. First of all, we've got RFC72, who says, great move to put him in the window next season. Spanish league slower, more technical, which suits him. Still would have liked to have seen him as the 10 here, not on the right. Paul McGarrigle saying it was the best situation for Hagi in the club. He needs games after his injury and not guaranteed a start. Where do you stand on Ianis Hagi's move and what that means for both Rangers and Ianis Hagi himself?
I mean, judging by the Instagram post, it felt like it was a leaving. It's not a loan. It's a loan to find the next club, and whether that'll be Alaves or not, there's no guarantee. But it definitely sounded like he's out. He's done. He's not wanted by Michael Beale, and that's the players he's got to replace him. The number 10 comment's the one that I'm most interested in. I thought that the whole time. He's an attacking midfielder. He's a number 10. He doesn't. Everyone, it's what do we say? If Roof was fit, we kept saying all these cliches about Rangers players. If Hagi had pace, he wouldn't be here. That's the reality. He was always slower of all the options that we used on the right side of midfield, and I just always thought he was a number 10, but there was people always in that position ahead of him, namely Aribo. I would have liked to have seen him in a 10, position for a longer period of time to actually see what he could do. I think he'll go to Spain and be really good. I think one of the things that people have missed with La Liga disappearing into the Viaplay sphere, that Spanish football's not as good as it was 10 years ago. I was watching what games I watched? Sociedad versus Las Palmas, I think, on Friday night. The quality is terrible. Like, the quality is really poor. So if he's going into even a decent Alaves side, he'll stand out very quickly, the type of footballer he is, as long as they play some form of football. So I think it's a move that suits us. I would hope that he goes and does well and puts himself in a window, and because we've not made that loan agreement, somebody comes in and is willing to pay 4, 5, 6 million for him, which I think in the flashes he showed at Rangers, if he'd stayed fit, you would expect him to be a 5, 6 million pound player if he was moving on. So that would be my main hope. I'm a bit gutted because, as Kyran said, I think he was a player that kind of knew how to manage the fans on social media and get on side with everyone with all his comments. Every time he did an interview, he thought he spoke well. When he did his recovery stuff on Instagram and posted it all, he just came off like a really came off like the type of pro you'd expect with the level his dad played at, to be honest. And I just think if he's not going to play, he needs to go. He can't be a bit back player, not at that age. But aye, he's another one. See, we kept saying this. One of his 5, 6 episodes ago I was on. He's another one that you're quite happy as long as he goes and does well. You'll probably keep an eye out for him.
Yeah, Kyran, it takes me back to I guess it was a post-match interview he did a couple of weeks ago. It was just after the Morton game, actually. He was the player put forward for the post-match press conference. He came on and he'd played the last 20, 25 minutes or so, showed up quite well. I think after that game, lots of Rangers fans were calling for him to start, and I think that's how the title came about for last week's podcast around starting the first leg against PSV. He was very clear in that press conference that he respected the manager's decision not to play him, but he completely disagreed with it. I guess you wouldn't really expect anything less from a professional footballer, to have that amount of confidence in themselves. But he was keen to highlight that he'd been the only player in the whole squad that had trained in every single training session since the start of pre-season, that he was as fit as he could be, and that he was ready to play, and all he wanted to do was play football. Interestingly, Michael Beale then came in straight after him and said he's still got a wee bit of way to go fitness-wise. So you could see there was a clear disconnect from that. Do you think this is the best move for both club and player?
100%, yeah. And when we talk about Michael Beale not really fancying him, and from Hagi's side saying that he was 100% fit, funnily enough, I had a bit of waiting about to do before the game at the weekend, and Kemal Roof done, not the game at the weekend, sorry, the midweek game last week. Kemal Roof done the on stage at New Edmondson House. His interview was brilliant, and they asked him, what's your situation with your fitness? And he said, I've never been fitter. I'm 100%. I'm ready to go. So that's a guy that the manager obviously fancies, because he's went straight into the starting lineup at a very tricky away tie at Ross County. And I know we'll go on to it, but he made the difference there. Would we have seen the manager doing that with Hagi when we talk about a guy that couldn't start against Greenock Morton, but fans wanted him to start in the most important game of our season financially? It was never going to happen. Never, ever going to happen. So in terms of the club, even if we've not got a fee, I think we may have got a fee. And the fact he's going to play football, he's going to be in that big shop window, yeah, absolutely. I think it is very clever business.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of comments coming in support of Hagi. Everyone seems to agree that it's the best move for both the club and the player, and it'll be interesting watching him. I'll need to renew my Viaplay subscription to watch Ianis Hagi at the weekends.
I don't think you'll get much value for that.
The Ianis Hagi versus Kieran Tierney matchup will be an interesting one whenever that takes place. We'll come back to the outgoings. There's some questions around Ben Davies in the comments. There's some questions around Glenn Kamara. We'll come back to those in a second. But the incomings are the more exciting ones, so let's talk a bit about them. John, today rumours seem to... I don't know, there was some conflicting reports today. Initially, we heard that Rangers aren't in for I was about to call him John Souttar, Harry Souttar. And then we heard that Rangers are in fact in for Harry Souttar, and should Leicester not receive any permanent bids for his services, then it's highly likely they'll sanction a loan deal for him to come to Rangers before the end of the transfer window. Is he a name that excites you? And you think fills a bit of a gap? I guess on the flip side, it suggests that Ben Davies is on his way out the door as well.
Yeah, I'm really surprised because we keep this is the phantom 3-5-2 is the thing that I think has been on every Rangers fan's lips for about 4 years now. As when Gerrard brought Hollander in, he said we've got that left-sided player now that we could play 3-5-2. That was before a Motherwell game about 4.5 seasons ago. He teased that 3-5-2 being an option with the full backs that we have, completely like wing backs comfortably. But I feel like it teases that again. If you're bringing Harry Souttar in, who is a £15 million centre half that played in the Premier League, and at times was good. He looked exposed, but he looked at the type of guy that had went up 4 divisions in 2 seasons. He looked exactly like that player. But I thought he's an absolutely brilliant centre half. He gives you physicality, being 6'4", 6'5", but just a really good player. He doesn't need to get familiar with the left centre half. I think it's to give Goldson and Souttar more of a break when there's quote unquote lesser games, because whether we are in the Champions League or the Europa League, we're going to be having to use a full squad. And I think if you're telling me it's Harry Souttar coming in instead of Ben Davies, that's a ridiculous upgrade as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one because, like you say, he was bought for £15 million by Leicester. He's not a man that's going to come on loan and expect to sit on the bench very often. So it will be really interesting to see how that plays out. Before I come on to you, Kyran, and get your thoughts, Theo Isaac very kindly saying, "Good stream, guys. If you do like the stream, please like the video itself. It really does help us. Drop us a comment, and we'll bring as many as we can up on the screen as we head through the different topics, as you've seen already. Kyran, as we if Souttar does come in, how do we get the balance right in the team in terms of giving Goldson, because Goldson's been a mainstay for however long. Obviously, he was injured last season for a chunk of time, but he's been a mainstay and we fully expect him to be a mainstay going forward. John Souttar, yes, he's had a few injuries, but he's done well. I think in the large part, last few weeks, he's maybe found himself caught under the ball a little bit, but he's still performed well. If Harry Souttar then comes in, how do we find the balance? I realise we do have potentially 65 games or so this season to play. So you think there's room for 3 high quality centre halves in there?
100%. And I believe that Harry Souttar will be a fantastic signing. I think that's a lot closer than a lot of people think. My experience of Harry Souttar, to be honest, was when he played with Australia in the World Cup. And he was phenomenal. I had everybody talking because he just came back from his cruciate injury at that point, hadn't he? And he played like a man possessed. So it will be a fantastic signing, but you've hit the nail right in the head, Craig. 65 games in a season. A guy like John Souttar, who's had the injury history like he's had, he needs a break. Am I right in saying he's played 9 of the last 10 games? Or something like that, which is phenomenal, because a year ago we would have been saying, oh, this guy probably can't complete 3 games in a row, but him and Goldson have been outstanding. We've kept a lot of clean sheets so far, and what's better than one Souttar is to have 2. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I think the rumblings were as well that Leon King's going to go out on loan, which doesn't surprise me at all, given that we kind of, I don't mean we panic bought, I think it was already on the cards, but we rushed it through to get Balogun in when the injury came about for King. So King goes out on loan and then Souttar then does come in. It balances it up again. Ben Davies going out is by the by. I think Ben Davies still, for me, has a future at Rangers. I think he can still do a job in there. Don't get me wrong, we're probably paying an absolute fortune in wages for him, and we've coughed up a heavy transfer fee. So if he goes, he goes. But if he stays, it's not the worst thing that could ever happen. So we're moving in the right direction. I'm really happy with the squad the way it is just now. 1 or 2 would make a huge difference.
Yeah, John, Kyran obviously mentioned Leon King there, and is rumoured today to be heading out on loan to either the English Championship or English League One. I would say that if he heads to English League One, he won't have a future at Rangers. If he heads to the English Championship, he's got a bit of a shot. I would almost go by saying where he ends up on loan will give more of a sign than anything as to if his future lies at Rangers or not. So we've got Leon King potentially heading out. We've got Ben Davies rumoured to be, or the club keen to listen to offers for Ben Davies. We've got Glenn Kamara, who reportedly is heading to Leeds for £5.5 million. It's interesting to seeing how the squad's starting to shape up. Now, are you happy with all of these moves that have been mooted?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting money in for people who aren't going to be part of the squad, aren't going to be in the first 18. So the more money we get, it's gone back out in wages, and I think that's probably where the Souttar interest has came from, and where that's becoming even a viable transfer, because he will be on Premier League wages that he signed for. So we're going to have to cover that. I'd imagine Kamara's money and any Davis outgoing or Leon King's wages or Hagi's wages being freed up is probably going to be the loan deal for Harry Souttar, because it's not going to be cheap. I mean, it's hard to tell. I'd imagine you'd be talking 40, 50 grand. I would think a £50 million player would be at least getting going into the Premier League. Yeah, we're getting the people out the door that I felt we need to. I think Glenn Kamara's starting to get some stick. We don't really know the ins and outs of what's actually going on, to be honest, but he does seem to be getting more and more stick publicly as this rolls on. And I think it's getting very close to when I said 3 weeks ago he's somebody that I'd still look out for. Is getting close to that way where you just want him gone before that really goes sour. Because I think if he's here at the end of that window, that's his good reputation at Rangers is very close to turning sour. So he needs gone as soon as possible. Yeah, but I think if Souttar comes in, I'm very happy with the squad we've built. Still not overly happy with how we're playing the squad we've got, but very happy with the squad we've ended up with.
See in terms of Souttar, Craig, sorry to butt in there. I think what we need to remember is think back when we qualified for the Champions League a year ago. Goldson getting injured, James Sands and Leon King at centre-back in our Champions League games is not good enough. I think we're learning lessons, and bringing a player of Harry Souttar's calibre in is exactly what we need. And Goldson not just derailed our Champions League sort of, not chances, but any chance of being competitive in the Champions League. It also derailed our season completely. That's when it swung back in Celtic's favour. So we've learnt lessons, and I think I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, and I think the other side of the city might be about to learn those same lessons that we learned last year if their central defence stays the same as it is, or it was at the weekend, I guess. So that'll be it. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Paul McGarrigo in the comments, Kyran says players in and players out may break even. That's if obviously the Glenn Kamara transfer goes through at the £5.5 million mark. Are you happy with the business that we've done so far this transfer window? Obviously the transfer deadline day is Friday at midnight. Harry Souttar has been linked, but he's really been the only player that's linked as incoming. Is a left-sided central defender enough for you, or is it we've kind of flirted with wingers so far in this transfer window, but not really? I guess Abdallah Sima in some respects can be classed as a bit of a winger or a wide player, but we've not really bought that out and out winger that I guess we expected us to. Matondo's obviously shown up a lot better than we expected him to after last season. Are you happy with the business? Would you want to see potentially a winger come in before Friday, or is a left-sided centre-half enough for you?
I'm delighted with the business, to be honest. John was right. Like, I'm not 100% on the way we're playing it, but I do think we're getting better. I was pleasantly happy with the performance against Ross County. Got the job done early, never looked troubled. Butland, I think, is the name on everybody's lips right now, he's had the hardest job trying to fill those gloves at Alan McGregor, but he's really sort of taken to the hearts of the Rangers fans just because he collects crosses. But he's been a fantastic signing. You look right across the board, Dessers will come good. I think we just need to be that wee bit patient with him. Once he gets a decent goal and a couple on the bounce, that confidence will do him a world of good. But against PSV last week, put an absolute power in. Danilo's going to take time to settle in as well. It's a brand new sort of style of football for him. The Dutch game's a lot slower than what we are here. You never really hear that spoke about Scottish football, but they'll all settle in. But as well, the thing is, when you make so many signings and you look at anybody's transfer window when they make signings, they don't always work out. All the players don't always work out. There's usually failures in there. So you accommodate for that as well. But I'm quite happy with what I've seen. And you mentioned the name Matondo there. he's been like a new sign in the past few games, and Beale's managed him very well. I felt like if he'd started him against Ross County, it's a tricky tie on quite a tight pitch, which probably didn't suit him. Giving him that wee half hour at the end when Ross County are a wee bit leggy and they're on the ropes, really done him the world of good. And I think we'll see the same against PSV. And see, once he gets a bit of confidence, then that's good management. It's really good coaching. So there's a lot to look forward to. I'm really happy with the squad at the moment. If you asked me that 2 weeks ago, it would have been the complete opposite. But we're getting there. I believe we're getting there.
John, keen to give you, I guess, a final word on this one. A couple of comments that I'll feed into this as well. Still loading 235 says, we desperately need a winger. We say the impact a direct and pacey winger can have when Matondo came on against PSV. And then Andy Mack says, do we not think we need a left back? Where do you stand on, firstly, the winger side of things, and then obviously Andy Mack's brought up a left back there?
The winger one's going to annoy you just because you need something different. I think too often you've seen under Gerrard, it was very obvious what the pattern was. As the fullbacks were passing, the two wide players came tens, and that's where you flooded the middle of the park. Beale's trying to do the same thing. It just looks a little more disjointed because he started with a diamond already in there. So he's kind of got a similar build-up, but he's keeping one of the tens higher up as a second striker, and he's bringing the other one in narrow. So if Taven, Borna, Barisic are the higher up, it just looks all over the place. You always need somebody in that final third pulling those fullbacks apart. Otherwise, teams will just defend the box. And when Rangers play a Livingston or Ross County, that's horrid because that's what teams want to do. Teams are quite happy if Rangers want to put crosses in for deep or try and penetrate through the middle where they've got a bank of 4 and 5 just sitting there and killing off any space. But the thing, I was looking back at some Norwich stuff because I honestly thought I'd maybe imagined that or got it completely wrong, but Cantwell was fully that player. He played in Grealish's position for Norwich. He played as that left-sided front free player, dribbling with the ball, driving into the box. That's why I always thought it was him and Lammers in the front three. I thought that was the way it was going to be. They were going to be the wide players that played there and you were going to get them driving at the ball. But I think what's actually happened is Cantwell's just been identified as having so much ability that I've seen a lot of comments last week that Cantwell wasn't a Champions League player. He was one of the players on the pitch that looked the most like a Champions League player. And looking at the PSV side, Cantwell's probably the only one that would maybe get into that starting 11 as far as I was concerned on that performance. So I think it's just became a point where he just considers Cantwell so invaluable in that middle of the pitch because he is quite aggressive in a press and he's not shy of putting in a tackle. I know he could have probably got sent off against PSV, but that dig's maybe missing in that midfield. There's a lot of players that will shape up and follow runners, but Cantwell will actually go put his foot in and actually press somebody and get around people. And I think Beale's maybe started to change that once he's got Cantwell in the door and realised what he's actually got available to him. And we're just maybe going to have to accept it. We're not going to play wide players.
Yeah, I think people might struggle to accept that. If we're honest, I think people mentally like the idea of a wide player that just dribbles past and has a go at fullbacks. I guess that's what we've got on one side for Matondo at the moment in terms of how he's shown up. It's what's the alternative if Matondo isn't there, and I think fans are almost looking at it like, who is the Fashion Sakala replacement? Right, that's probably how fans are looking at who's the one that can offer us something different going forward. Some people liked Fashion Sakala, some people definitely did not like Fashion Sakala, but he did offer us something different, and I'm not quite sure we've got that at this moment in time in the squad. So it'll be interesting to see how that one develops. And then just on the left back situation, just to provide examples of two completely different ways of thinking from two Rangers fans in consecutive comments. We've got Kendall Matthews, who's part of the team here at TII. Borna playing well this season. Unless we sell him, we stick. And then Andy Mack giving us a nice wee segue into the PSV game. Barisic was targeted by PSV as a weak link. John, I can see that you think you kind of disagree with that one.
It's a myth. I felt the same way about Tav against Servette. We play with a diamond in midfield. We are forcing teams to go 2v1 on the outside. We're comfortable doing that. That's what Beale wants to happen. That's actually what Gerrard did with his 4-3-3. We are happy. Fans freak out because a team's got the ball 30 yards for goal on the touchline that can put in a cross, or they've got a 2v1. Teams aren't targeting Tav and Barisic. They're going where the space is against Rangers, and we're putting both strikers to press their fullbacks in the way, and we're putting a diamond four in the middle. So there's no space for teams. Teams are naturally having to go on the outside. And I think over the all, when I watched at the stadium, I was losing my mind because it just felt like we let PSV have all the ball. But when I watched it back the next day, I was like, it was perfect. Have the ball on the outside. Let the left back have the ball 40 yards for goal. We've got everyone in the central area that we want. We've got Goldson and Souttar able to pick up runners. We were, by and large, totally comfortable. I don't think they targeted Barisic and Tav, and I actually think when I watched it back, I think Tav had got beat on 1 out of 5 1v1s, and I think Barisic didn't really get. I think he only got beaten. He pulled back Yoko down. I think that was the only time he got done, and I don't know. I just think it's a myth because the way the game played out, it looked like people were targeting, but at that level, I don't think you do. I don't think teams are like that. I think they just have a style of play. The way we combated that was by saying, right, they can have it on the outside, but that meant that Tav and Barisic were going to look like they were getting bombed at. But it's a pretty perfect game plan. I expect to look like they're getting targeted again on Wednesday because it's going to be the exact same setup.
Yeah, I think we'll come back onto this topic about how PSV set up, how Rangers set up, and we'll kind of compare and contrast the two as we go. Kyran, it's going to be a huge night on Wednesday night. It's a huge week for Rangers, obviously, with the second leg of the Champions League playoff round, that way to PSV, and then at home to Celtic. There's lots of conversation about, do you think we can win them both? If we could pick one, which one would you pick? But just looking ahead to Wednesday night, first of all, how confident are you that Rangers can get the win and go through? We saw last year how we can do it. I think we saw in the first leg that, well, as John says, we were quite happy to give PSV the ball in non-dangerous areas. Don't think PSV created that many clear-cut chances against us, given how many, given how much of the ball they had, and actually we probably had the better chances over the course of the game. How confident are you heading into Wednesday night that we can go there and we can get a result?
I can't say I'm overly confident, but I can say I'm a hell of a lot more confident than I was before the game last week. Thinking about the game last Tuesday wasn't it? A hell of a game of football. Two teams really going at it, and we've seen the quality that we've been crying to see for a while. I think the game this week will be a very different game to what it was last week. I'd love to see set up be a bit more conservative, maybe go 5 at the back and try and hold them for as long as we can, and then try and nick that goal that's going to put them under pressure and put the fans in their back. Because I think Bill said it in one of his press conferences, or one of the players said that the longer we can keep their fans quiet and getting on their back, because they can be a quite unforgiving fan base, the PSV fans, the more we can add to that, the better. It becomes a lot tougher for them. You've seen it with us in the first leg, that we became the 12th man. We really get behind our team in European nights, and you could see the players buzzing off it on the pitch. The amount of times that Dessers and Cantwell came towards the sidelines and they were kind of ushering the fans on to give a bit more, that they really, really play off it. So for me, I'm expecting a different game. I'd love it if we went and tried to hit them on the break, and I think that would be the best thing for us, just to try and contain them for as long as we can, because they're a very good side. I do think they're a much better side than last year, but when I look at our squad from last year, I also believe we're a better team as well.
Yeah, John, I want to understand how you rate our chances, but actually I disagree with Kyran on one point there in terms of how similar or different the game will be to last week. I actually think the game will be almost identical to how it was last week, just in terms of how we will invite PSV onto us. I think we'll give them the ball in the midfield up to a certain point. I think we do need to be more physical in that midfield, and in that first half last week, PSV in the midfield areas ran us riot. They just dragged us left, right and centre, and we couldn't get to grips with a quick movement. We couldn't get to grips with how quickly they were passing the ball and then moving. But I actually think the general setup of the game will be very similar. How do you firstly view our chances, and then how do you view the game will set up?
I think we've got a good chance. I do think I feel similar to Kieran. I feel more confident now I've seen them, but in the same breath, they're a much better team than we played last year. They look about 3 or 4 times the level that they were at. Really, really aggressive the way they play. So we're playing a harder team. We've got a better squad again, but we're playing a harder PSV team. But having seen them, I feel a bit more relaxed, because I felt It wasn't that what they were doing wasn't working, though. It was working. They were getting in the areas they wanted to get into, but it became very predictable. The only thing I would be changing is maybe I, all my mates were laughing. I don't like John Lundstram. I don't think I don't get it. But one of the things I always said when we signed John Lundstram would be a standout in huge games, because that's what he was at Sheffield United in the Premier League when they played Arsenal, Liverpool, Man United, Man City. John Lundstram was one of the best players in the park. It was when Sheffield United played similar type teams it became a bit, what's he adding to your team? So for his energy, I felt like Cifuentes was a bit off it. I felt Raskin tired very quickly in that game. Jack was doing a lot of covering. I think maybe somebody like Lundstram can get a bit more mobile in that midfield three would be one of the changes I would see. The only other thing differently is the left centre half. If we're going to have the two up top in that diamond, I'd rather be pressed fullbacks in rather than pressing centre forward out to fullback, because if you can stop the ball going into that into their fullbacks and down the line, you're kind of killing off a lot of what we were giving off, and I think it would keep them going back towards goal. And I do think that left centre half has a proper mistake in him. When he's given too much time in the ball, he gets a bit lazy. That would be my only thing. Instead of Dessers splitting the two of them, I'd want them to split off the fullbacks and just let the two centre halves have the ball and let them try and find the three in the middle. And we've got that diamond four, and allow Cantwell to go press one of them if they shut it off. That would be my only change. But I think Beale will probably look back at that game and be like, we pretty much nailed what we wanted to. If you'd told us that it would have been 2-1 up and only conceding from a corner, that would be disappointing, because they were only putting 4 people in the box. But I think the game plan was pretty much nailed on, so I don't know what he'd change. But it is, managing the PSV crowd is going to be a big part of this, because they've got a lot of the same negative aspects that Rangers fans can sometimes have. They can make it really hostile if passes start going square. That's exactly what happened last year. They started getting frustrated. The fans started groaning every pass. And it doesn't matter how good you think you are, players just can't cope with that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. Just going back to your John Lundstram point, I am not a huge John Lundstram fan. I thought he came on last week in the first leg and made a real difference. I think he marshalled their midfield a lot better than we had done when it was Raskin and Cifuentes. And there, I thought Cifuentes was out on his feet after 60 minutes last week, and that's probably been quite generous. He's probably out on his feet at half time. If we're brutally honest, I guess it's one thing that just highlights the physical difference between playing at one of the highest levels of European football compared to playing in the MLS, and potentially it's something we need to consider when we're looking at. Everyone was looking at the videos of Cifuentes and the class goals he was scoring and the assists he was getting, and maybe we just need to give a wee bit more leeway on that front in terms of the jump that he's having to make and having to adjust to. I think he'll be a great player for us, but I think in games like Wednesday night, John Lundstram may be a better option to have alongside Raskin, and they are just to give that bit of extra bite and to give that bit of physicality, and to just basically try and annoy Sangare, who's a tremendous player, but we let him run the game last week in that first half, up until Sima scored. Person that we need to try and stop, I guess. It's easier said than done. I'm not sure many football teams out there can, but Kyran, where do you stand on John Lundstram potentially coming in, the role he could play, if he made a difference at all when he came on last week, and that importance of stopping Sangare and that midfield? Everything seems to go through him.
I think John makes a great point with that Lundstram can be that player, and we're due a big performance out of him. His best performances in a Rangers shirt have been in Europe in the big games. That European run, we were singing his name for a reason. That's been his best period at Rangers, but I'm kind of fed up waiting for the performance. It's like, come on, you're in your last year of your contract. It's prove it time. So he has to step up. But when I say we sit in conservative, maybe not five across the back. It might be a flat 3 in the middle, where it's made up of Raskin, Jack and Lundstram. I thought Cifuentes done all right last week, bearing in mind that I don't think this will happen given that Cifuentes was given the full rest against Ross County at the weekend. So he's going to be fresh. It's perhaps that maybe he was tired and needed the rest. So that suggests to me that Cifuentes will start. But I wouldn't be too bothered if Lundstram did start ahead of him. Raskin did do a great job, and you guys are right, he did tire, but he had the job of pestering Singari, and that's where the first goal came from. He's caught him close body facing the goalkeeper, come in on his blind side and just nicked it. And that's exactly what we were looking for. Look how high he's pressing up the pitch there. Your centre mid pressing up there against their best player is arguably what you're screaming out for. So it will be exciting to see what he goes with, but I don't know if Lundstram will start, but we just need to wait and see. But I wouldn't be bored. I've got faith in Beale.
Yeah, John, I'm keen to get your opinion on Ibrahim Sangare. He's obviously been linked with a move to Liverpool. Sadly, not quickly enough to not play on Wednesday night. But we've seen him 3 times now. It'll be a 4th time on Wednesday over the past 2 years. He's ran the game every single time, in my opinion. How do Rangers go about combating that? Is it really just cutting off his options that he can go to rather than stopping him playing, or is it putting someone on him to follow him around, or how do you see the best way to combat him?
No, that's kind of what I'm getting at with the two strikers actually pressing fullbacks in, is because you can then have, similar to what we got with the goal, you can get Raskin and Cantwell to go press him either side, and he doesn't get the option to even receive the ball. He won't get the ball. The fullbacks don't get the ball. They're going to have to go to their goalie and then eventually go longer to us, or try again, go to their centre halves and try play in them, and you get people around them. I think the longer you let Sangare get on the ball and have comfortable possession, which we did do too much in the first half until we pressed him, you make it easy for him. You get him comfortable in the game. He starts dictating the game. I would just like us to go and do that. Press 2 strikers inside fullbacks and get him on the ball if he wants it, and make sure we've got people aggressively pressing, because you can go press him and sit off him as well with other player, and you've actually got those numbers in there. That would just be how aggressively I would do it. I think if you give him any time to get comfortable in the game, it'll just be another Sangare show, and he'll just dictate what he wants to do. Because he's going to go for 50, 60 million. These are the type of players we're playing against now. Like, he's what I reckon he'll go on to be what Tottenham thought Ndombele was going to be at the time they signed him. I think he'll be that good. I mean, because I watched Ndombele in Serie A last year, and it was absolutely unbelievable. So that's the level he's going to go for, really high figures, and that's where we're actually competing to get into the Champions League. That's how good this PSV side have got to, as we are competing with teams that were actually in the group stage last year now. So I think you need to get around him. I don't think you can let him have 10 minutes to have 15, 20 touches of the game and pick out passes and decide what he wants to do. You need to stop him.
Yeah, I have to agree with that one. I think it's also important to continue to put the context around the quality of the team that we're taking on here. It's easy enough for people to say, they're not even in the Champions League, but the route to the Champions League gets tougher and tougher every single year, and we are sadly going through the qualifiers year after and the quality as it goes up. Kyran, we obviously spoke about Sangare there. Keen to speak about some of the other, I guess, strengths that PSV have. Tends to be out wide. I know we're trying to force them out wide, but Noah Lang on the left hand side and Bakayoko on the right hand side, I believe. I've got those the right way round. We're really positive, and then Nigel De Jong, and up front we know how dangerous he can be. Defensively, PSV looked fairly shaky, or not too competent. I'll go for, but going forward, they're a bit of a frightening prospect. I thought we marshalled them quite well for large parts last week. It's just all about staying focused, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'd be delighted if they had Nigel De Jong up front, Craig. It's his half brother Luke. We've all done it, mate. I'm sorry. Now, I think looking at the game last week, Noah Lang, I feel that Lang could be one that has got a short fuse. He seemed to take the bait. There was a spat with Ryan Jack. I nearly called him Nigel Jack there, by the way. There was a spat with Ryan Jack in the first half where he kind of spat the dummy out a wee bit, and I think he's one you should be kind of getting on his case early doors. Fantastic player, though, absolutely brilliant player. But as John said, there's no end to quality in this PSV side, and this is what we're up against. This is a level that if you want to dine at the top table, you've got to be prepared to go toe-to-toe with them. Am I right in saying Bakayoko's been linked with somebody big as well?
Yeah, he was linked with it. PSG today he was linked with,
There
as
you
far as
go.
I remember. So I think it's 20 to 25 million euros. PSV won double that. So just shows you.
It is they're littered with top quality right throughout that team. I think any of the top clubs in Europe could take their pick at any player in that side. And when you look at signing Cyriel Dessers last week, he's went straight into their team and not looked at a place at all. But we're a good team as well. We're maybe not littered with the same level of quality as them, but as a team, we really turned up last week, and it's gave me more confidence coming into this game. So, yeah. Again, I said at the top of the show, fantastic game last week. Hopefully we get the same this week, but we come out on top.
Yeah, John, Kyran said there that we're a good team as well, and that we can play football. I think we saw with the 2 goals we scored last week, just how good we can be if we're on it. But the negative noise from the Dutch media and the Dutch ex-footballers keeps coming. I think every time PSV and Rangers are mentioned in the same breath, it tends to be Joey Veerman, mind you, that's in front of a microphone. But there was another, I can't remember the guy's name if I'm brutally honest, but there was a Dutch football legend, he was called, who basically said, we already know Rangers can't play football. Why do you think that's levelled at us? Is that just down to the Dutch ideology of how they like to see football being played, or is it, do you think they genuinely believe that we are just a crap team that they should be running over left, right, and centre?
We get it, man. We get it. He's invented total football, and you have got a way you like seeing football. They probably freak out looking at our side and not realising there's any wingers in it, and they're just really, really pissed off that that's how it goes. There's different ways to play football. I don't like it. I don't like the way we set up. I don't like that we just gave PSV all the ball and let them play football. But I think if we did go toe-to-toe with PSV, we would have lost. So they need to just accept that they go through peaks and troughs. Scottish football will go through areas where at times Rangers and Celtic are better than Ajax and PSV overall. But right now there's been a pretty consistent trajectory of PSV and Ajax creating good players, selling them on for money, being able to replace them. And Dutch football is just a couple of levels ahead of Scottish football as it stands. So we can't come and go toe-to-toe. We can't come and play football against you. We'll play football that we think is the best way to beat you. And right now, as it stands, in my lifetime, that's worked. But I think it's a bit rich to say we never play football, because that advocate side absolutely schooled PSV on their own type of football. Yes, going on last year's performance, it was pretty disgusting, but I can't remember the nationality of the manager we had at the time, what type of football we might be playing. So, but Kieran's right to point out that Noah Lang, by the way. I used to 30 yellow cards and 3 red cards in the last 2.5 seasons would suggest that he's a person that I think Ryan Jack was aware of when he went over and confronted him lying in the deck. I think he's someone that you could tease into doing something stupid in a big game like this.
It's not long till he gets another red.
I was going to come to you and ask you the next question there, Kyran, but I'm going to give you a miss now.
Do you know something? They may have invented total football, but they also invented the horseshoe, and we've seen how that worked out.
Kyran, just on that, John obviously mentioned the fact that we absolutely schooled PSV back when Advocate was in charge. They didn't beat us across the two games last season. They didn't beat us in the first leg. I think it's 7 games in total we've had against PSV in our history, 4 wins and 3 draws. Where does the confidence come from for them? And is it? I think it'd be harsh to say it's misplaced, because I think we would all admit PSV this season are a much better team than Rangers, and they've gone up at least 1 level, if not 2 levels, over the last year or so. Is it misplaced confidence? Is it arrogance, do you think?
I think it is. I don't know. I'm right with you guys. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's sour grapes almost, because they see us as their bogey team. Again, they're maybe fearful that we turn them over again. Imagine we turned them over twice in a row, and that team that's worth so much money, and they have spent a lot of money, we turn them over again and they're in the Europa League. Like, that's a catastrophic disaster for PSV. They won the double last year. For us, it would be huge. Again, credit where it's due. If we got the job done, then it can't be overlooked. But I don't know where this confidence comes from. I think it is just a Dutch trait, where you've seen a lot of Dutch players come to us and they've been super confident and laid back. And I'm just not one that likes to see guys come out in their social media or in the mainstream media and start making comments before a ball's kicked. we've seen it a million times, and it comes back to haunt you. Like, do your talking on the pitch, and it's fine by me what they want to see. Pin it up in the dressing room wall like they used to do in the old days. It can only fire you on to do better, and we even seen it with before Servette played Genk, and this is we're already thinking about Rangers. Seen how that panned out as well. Nothing's ever a given in football, so I'm not for all the talking, no action. It's up to us to go and shut them up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul McGarrigle here saying, do we get to put PSV on our mantelpiece after Wednesday? I'm not sure how old your house is, Paul, but if you've got a mantelpiece, but there you go. I'll let you have it if that's the case. Fingers crossed we are celebrating a win. Anyway, on that front, and John, let's have a look a bit at the forward line for Wednesday night. Cyriel Dessers, I thought, put in one of his best displays so far for Rangers in the first leg. He dealt with the physicality, but he also was able to hold the ball up. He was able to take nice touches. He obviously assisted both goals. His pass for Matondo's goal was absolutely unreal and wasn't something that I had necessarily expected to be within his skill set. He seems to be the first choice striker at the moment. I would expect him to start on Wednesday night. Would you agree?
I think he's a set. It's funny. It's one of those ones, right? Because when you're watching the game at the stadium in the midst of it, you can't really focus on what's happening. You're too anxious. There's a big game going on. Your heart rate's going. So I was one of the people that when I left the game initially, I thought he had a really poor performance. It wasn't until I'd watched the game the next day, and I was like, I was kind of laughing at how my comments and group chats were going compared to what I thought watching the back. I was like, this is mental. I could have swore this guy had an absolute howler and done nothing except set up that goal. And then I just watched how he was cutting off passing lanes, his work rate when he brought people into play when we did go to the counter. So I think that's probably why I do tend to watch games back when I'm calmed down, so I can have a decent opinion on it. So I think he just seems like he's getting a little bit better every single time I see him play. So no, he's definitely going to start, yeah.
And then I'll start with you, John, then Kyran, I'll come to you for your thoughts across a few questions. John, Sima obviously started first leg. He had an absolute howler until he hit the top corner with that first goal. I don't think he offered a great deal more after that. Would you, given how Rabbi Matondo's played, he obviously came off the bench at the weekend there as well, so he'll be pretty fresh. Would you expect him to be in the starting lineup on Wednesday?
Yeah, Sima's one of the players whose performance I felt on the night was the same as when I watched it back. He did not have a great game, barring his goal. Yeah, I think Matondo looked really lively. I think if that volleyed went in, it'd be one of the best goals I've ever seen live. I couldn't believe how close that was. He's been managed really well. He's a player that I think, see if you just sprinkle him in and get his confidence up, he's even kind of let that out of the bag even himself when he said that I feel like I just need a bit of confidence in my game. And I think that's something that we do just totally expect for footballers to be there. You should just be confident to go out in front of 50,000 mental fans and play football as if nobody's abusing you on social media every day if you have a poor performance. I think if you just kind of sprinkle him in, let him do his talking on the pitch, let him calm down, he's still a young footballer. I think we might actually start to, I don't want to get carried away, but I do think we will start to see Matondo be the player that we'd signed. I would start him ahead of Sima.
Yeah, there's plenty of interesting comments actually coming in around what the front three should look like. Kyran, I'll flash these up on the screen and then you can give us your thoughts in terms of the front three overall. So Kendall coming in saying Matondo, Dessers, Cantwell. Brian McEwen says Cantwell, Sima and Dessers. Paul McGarrigle, Cantwell, Matondo, Dessers, and RFC just, I guess, fighting the fight for Abdallah Sima here. Sima's physicality is why I'll start if it's one winger, especially for defending set pieces. How do you think firstly, how impressed have you been with Dessers as he's gone game by game? He seems to have improved in the game against PSV last Tuesday night at Ibrox was, I think, his best game so far. And then how do you think he'll partner him in that sort of front three? Sam Lammers was a mainstay at the start of the season, but he doesn't seem to be mentioned by many in terms of being an option for Wednesday night.
Yeah, I really like Dessers. I think folk have gave him a hard time. Like, it's took him longer than I've expected to settle in, but he admitted to it himself. Like, he's moved to another country. He hadn't played for 3 months due to injury. It's going to take him a while to pick up his sharpness again, but I think we're getting there with him. I love his work ethic. Like you said, his best game in the Rangers jersey was against PSV last week. And as John said, he'll be the first name in the team sheet up front, given that I feel like he won the physical battle against the two centre-backs who look like the weak link aside from the keeper for PSV. So they can be got at there. Although I think I know we're going to look ahead to it. I think it might look slightly different against Celtic, but I think the PSV game, it's going to be Dessers through the middle. I don't know. I would go with Sima again. And I don't think he done as bad as what people are making out. I felt like his pace was a real threat, that maybe the final product, aside from his goal, wasn't there, but it was a constant threat for their fullback, and that was a big thing. But I was maybe 10 rows from the front near the halfway line at the game, and I could see Cantwell getting quite frustrated that he wasn't doing his work going back the way. So I don't know how that translates to the dressing room, but I feel like Michael Beale's got more trust in Sima than he does Matondo, and we're at a stage with Matondo that we don't really want him to have a poor performance at the moment. So again, bringing him on off the bench and really giving him that wee bit of confidence to kick on and do well. Imagine he came on against PSV and done well and we went through it, would set him up for the rest of the season, I feel. So for me, I'd stick with the same front three of Cantwell, Sima and Dessers.
Yeah, I'm interested in the position of Todd Cantwell. I guess it tends to be when we're playing domestic football, Cantwell moves back one. Obviously, we know we're more in control of the game, we're more in control of possession, and we have to unpick, or we tend to have to unpick defences from a bit deeper. We saw in the game against PSV, and I think we saw in the Servette games as well, in terms of Cantwell moving forward one into that front line. John, is that a move you're supportive of? Do you think Cantwell in Europe does better in that part, as part of that front three?
Yeah, for me, Cantwell moving into the final third in all games is what I would have. I would facilitate that constantly, mate. This is a guy who Aston Villa wanted to replace Jack Grealish with, and Norwich wouldn't allow him to go for less than 40 million. That's what derailed Todd Cantwell's Norwich career, was a held up transfer for £40 million. That's the level of player we got for £1.5 million. He's still young, but he was an attacking midfielder. He was playing in the final third for Norwich, and in the Premier League was doing it well. In the Championship, he totally stood out and was in Team of the Year. That's why you're going to get the best out of him in these games. I would always have him in that front line, whether it's in behind as a 10 and we two up front, or you play him off the left. Cantwell needs to be in the areas that he's breaking teams down, because he'll draw fouls. You can say what you want about comparisons. I'm not comparing it with Jack Grealish, right? But see, if you even ordered Jack Grealish off Wish, he's still a player that rules the Scottish football. He's still a player that's going to stand out in the Champions League for Rangers. Get him in the areas where it's decisive. Don't have him picking up the ball in the middle third of the pitch. Have him higher up, dictating play.
Yeah, RFC72 says there, Cantwell's presence from the front is incredible. And I think we do see that energy and how important that could be, especially against us. I think you've both said against a defence that's potentially the weaker part of the PSV team. It can really give us chances, as we saw for the first goal last week. Still Odin 235 says Cantwell having freedom allows him to have the best impact possible on the game. I think everyone's on board with Cantwell being part of that front three. Kyran, I'm interested to get your thoughts on our Brazilian number 99. He's not really had a mention here. We've paid £6 million for him. It's one of our biggest games of the season, and he isn't really mentioned as a realistic starting option. Is that purely down to the style of play that he has compared to the style of play Dessers has? Is it down to the form Dessers has shown, or do you not feel like he's shown enough so far in a Rangers jersey to show that he deserves to start a game like this?
Don't think he showed enough yet. The best is yet to come from him. I think when you say the style of play, when you look at the game plan, I think Danilo's going to be more suited to a 2 up front as opposed to a 3. I can't see him playing that slightly deeper, wider, deeper left role or the inside 10. I think it will be up front with a partner. Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely not opposed to seeing Danilo and Roof up front together domestically, because I think they would complement each other well, given that they're similar players. But for me, he's a fantastic sub to bring off the bench in this game during the week, but I will be absolutely stunned if Danilo starts. But the best is yet to come from him. It really is, but not for me. Not for me during the week.
Yeah, there's a few comments here. Kendall saying off the bench at 60 minutes. Kirby Cubster saying he'll play his part. We'll probably get the winner. Paul McGarrigle, he's more of a box player. Dessers does all the hard graft. I think that those are sort of traits that we've all seen, and we do hope that we do know that both will have their part to play. John, just before we get on to the score prediction for Wednesday night, which won't be an easy one in terms of are you going to tempt fate or not, but just in terms of the situation itself, the potential riches that come with playing in the Champions League, how important is it, or is it important at all that Rangers win on Wednesday night, or actually is the Europa League, given it's more a level, is that more of a, I don't want to say is that a better thing for the season longer term, but is it a better thing for Rangers if we don't win? It's such a hard question to kind of answer.
I think we kind of spoke about this when the draw was made. I think the ideal scenario for us is Champions League group stage, finish third and fall into Europa League and have the European season you want. I think you need to get into the Champions League. I think these players that we are signing, and to keep that kind of calibre of young footballer coming to Rangers, it needs to be the progression of promise in Champions League football to these players. And the proof is only going to be in the pudding. The next Todd Cantwell we get is only going to come if we say, well, we're progressing in the Champions League. We fall into Europa League most seasons. Raskins are going to come. You might even get a Harry Souttar coming on loan. That might be the Champions League allure that's even making him consider come to us. So I think for that aspect, that's what PSV and Ajax and stuff have tended to do, and that's why they tend to be able to replace the good players they sell, is because they have that normally continued success by getting to the Champions League. We need that to be able to do that. The business model falls apart a little bit. I still think the players that we've got will sell on and we'll make money off of, but players will learn playing Champions League football. It's where everyone wants to play. I think we need to go in and I think for us it's going in and fixing what happened last year. I don't expect us to win 3 group games, but to go in and kind of undo a lot of the wrongdoings, because there was a lot of heavy batterings in that group stage. It'd be good to go in and see us be able to be more competitive.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are not living in fear, but wary about the potential of more batterings and what the impact that could have on the squad. So all it takes is a bad draw. I mean, you could get a bad draw. I don't know if any of you have seen the Europa League pots for this season, but you get a bad draw in the Europa League and you could be on the end of a fair few tough results. I know Aberdeen are in a good position to potentially make it into the Europa League, but that could get very scary for them very quickly if you have a look at the Europa League pots, and it could be the same for any team in Scotland. But I do think the Europa League is more a level, but like John says, we want to be able to attract the players. We do want to improve year on year, and we want to make it into the Champions League and show that that's the level that we aspire to be at year after year. Obviously, the target for us this season as well is to win the league, at which point you're into the Champions League automatically, and it's into that brand new format as well, where I don't even understand it fully yet, but you get I think it's 10 games against a random number of teams, and you're going to be playing a lot more games at that level next season. So I think it's important that we continue to get our players experience at that level and continue to allow us to build. William N01 says, I think it's massive for us to win, especially with the league. If we would end up playing Thursday, Sunday every week, we'll end up playing catch up. Kyran, what's your thoughts on how important it is for Rangers to reach the Champions League?
I think the most important thing, aside from the players and attracting quality, is the financial side. We need that money, considering that Celtic are already there and our main competitor domestically is them. So financially, it's huge for us. It would be brilliant to have that injection that you automatically get there. Is it a disaster if you go into the Europa League? No. From everything that I've seen, this team would comfortably compete in that group stage and progress to knockout football. But yeah, it's where you want to be. The Champions League's where you want to be. The team deserves to be there. And Judd said, that a lot of these players came here knowing that they had a real chance to go. We've maybe not get the right luck of the drawn PSV, but we're right in it. It's half time in that game and we're right in it. So for me, would it be a disaster if we dropped into the Europa League? Absolutely not. But I think as fans, they were once bitten, twice shy because of last year that we took an absolute drubbing and just about every single game, and it really put us off track with our domestic season as well. The squad's a lot better equipped when we talk about guys like Danilo being able to come off the bench, Lammers. We're a stronger team now. We're a stronger team to cope with it now. So when I look across the city, they're dealing with a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. So I hope in the Champions League they have a season like we had last year and we go on and do okay.
Yeah, I think it'll be a tough ask on Wednesday night, but I am cautiously hopeful, I'll put it as, that we will indeed be playing in the Champions League this season. Before I get your thoughts, as we obviously at the start of Old Firm week, and that's normally the focus, a huge week for Rangers. Before we get on to getting how you're feeling at this stage of the week, John, can I come to you first for a score prediction?
Is this the part where we can just get deliberately snipped onto Celtic's social media? Rangers are going to pump PSV 3-0. It's going to be a comfortable win. No, I think if Rangers are going to win, it's going to be a 2-1. I can see this being a draw after 90 minutes, so, and then it's who blinks first. This has felt like, from watching that game back, this has felt like I'm going to see a second leg that goes to penalties, which is the thing that concerns me most. I don't think I've got the heart for that anymore, but it feels like it's a draw all the way through to 120.
I hadn't even considered extra time, so thanks very much for that.
I've got PTSD for Seville, so I hope not.
Yeah, Kyran, you got your score prediction?
Oh, I'm gonna go a grubby 1-0 Rangers.
I'm in the same boat as you. I think quite similar to last year, actually, in terms of we just hold it solid and we try and pounce on a chance, much like we did last year in terms of Tillman and then passing inside to Cholak, and much we did in the first leg in terms of Raskin and Dessers going to Sima and capitalising on their mistakes. I think that's our best opportunity as long as we stay solid. So I think 1-0 to Rangers is a good shout, but I don't think it'll be an easy watch, and I don't think I'll enjoy watching it that much. But as long as Rangers win, that's all that matters for me. Right, as I said, just to close us off, we're at the start of Old Firm week. A lot of stuff happened over the weekend. The pendulum seemed to shift a wee bit towards our direction, which feels like the first time in forever that's actually happened. John, how are you feeling at this stage of the week? Has the weekend given you more confidence? Has it put you more on edge? Where do you lie in that kind of scale?
I watched just the sports scene highlights of their game, and I actually don't think they were. Obviously, I've not seen the 90 minutes, and I've seen all the Celtic fans' reaction. I didn't think they were that bad. I thought St Johnstone were really low block, had everyone behind the ball, were able to hit people on the counter. But Celtic had chances, like really missed 3 opportunities for 6 yards out, that when you take one of those in the first half, you maybe go on and pump St Johnstone 4-5-6 because the game's opened up. The centre half, I mean, if you're telling me Liam Scales is starting at centre half in an Old Firm at Ibrox, I'm all over that. And I actually think Celtic transitioning from what Postecoglou's football was to Rodgers' football, there's only going to be more injuries happening as the players adapt to a lower intensity style of football. That's why all the players are pulling up now. If you change that drastically from one style to the other, I just think you're going to see more and more people. Vickers, Hatate were 2 of the best players last year. The difference makers in Old Firms, them being out is absolutely huge, and add to all the other ones. It's annoying we've got the PSV game in front of this, because this would be a week where you would just be like, kind of licking your lips looking forward to the Old Firm, but you've got this bit in the middle of it where you can't really get excited about it. But I do think that result really helped, that you could kind of begin into the break not just having drawn level with them. You've now got the opportunity to actually go above them.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the real carrot at the end of the week that we're looking forward to. Kyran, how are you feeling? Obviously, we've got the PSV game on Wednesday, which we've just went through in length, but looking ahead, the Old Firm was always kind of looming on the horizon. How are you feeling at this stage of the week?
I'm quietly optimistic. obviously they've got their injuries, they've dropped points, but at the same time, you just can't be too confident going into these games. I remember the last time they were like this and they were strung with injuries, thrown a team together of players that had never played for them, and Lennon came to Ibrox and done a job on us and beat us 2-0, so it's easy to get ahead of yourself, but I hope that getting a result midweek could spur the team on to really give us momentum and let it stew for them over the international break. This is a huge opportunity, and somebody mentioned it on Twitter during the week, and I hadn't really thought about it. There's a lot of pressure on Rodgers, but there's also a hell of a lot of pressure on Michael Beale to go and win this because of the expectations. I feel that when John touched on the style of play earlier of trying to force them in the way as opposed to out the fullbacks, we done that the last time we played Celtic, where Cantwell sat as a false nine, and they done the job on McGregor, that they were taking shots each to kind of man him, not so much man mark him, just so that they couldn't feed freely through McGregor. And he is their main threat. He's always been. He's a fantastic player. So for us, if we can nullify that threat and force them wide, we've seen what they've got at fullback, and it's not really much. That's, well, when I talk about their fullbacks, we just touched on the centre backs as well. They're really struggling in that backline. So they're there to be got at, but it's up to us to turn up and be the team to take it to them. Our squad depth is fantastic. So regardless of what happens on Wednesday night, if players are tired, if it goes the full way, we've got guys that can come in and we can rotate. So for me, I'm a lot more confident than I would have been this time last year. So let's go.
Let's go. There's a phrase I've not heard for a little while. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I think we'll round off the podcast there. Please let us know what you think ahead of the PSV game, how you think we'll fare. Let us know how you're feeling ahead of the Old Firm game this weekend, and what is a huge week for Rangers. And if we get 2 wins, we'll be on cloud 9 heading into the international break. Thank you very much to Kyran for joining us. Thank you very much to John for joining us. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Please remember to give the video a like if you have enjoyed the content. It helps us massively. Leave a comment with any of your thoughts, whether you agree, disagree, or are unsure. If you agree or disagree with our opinions, leave your thoughts and we'll make sure to come back to them in the comments. And yes, remember to subscribe to the TII podcast either on YouTube or wherever you download your podcasts from. Kyle will be back on the Thursday night, hopefully on a positive note after a PSV win and with some news of a Champions League group stage draw. And he will kick off looking forward to the Old Firm game at the weekend. Hope you all have a good week, and hopefully a Rangers win on Wednesday night will make that even better. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Until next time, goodbye.